Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're tackling a topic that's got everyone talking, the 4-day work week. But get this, we're not just looking at how it affects, our work-life balance. We're talking about Wall Street, the stock market, the whole shebang.
That's right. We're diving headfirst into this really fascinating overlap between, changing workplace dynamics and how investors react. Because believe it or not, when Belgium decided to experiment with the 4-day work week, the stock market actually took notice.
It sure did. So, quick recap for anyone who missed the headlines. Back in 2022, Belgium passed some pretty groundbreaking legislation, to say the least. Workers can actually request a 4-day work week, and here's the kicker, with no reduction in pay. And employers, well, they're legally obligated to at least consider it.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about a few companies trying this out. This is the whole country. Almost every single business in Belgium is affected.
It's a massive social and economic experiment. I mean, everyone's watching to see what happens.
Absolutely. And you know me, I always go straight for the juicy questions. How did the stock market react? Did investors totally freak out when they heard about this? I mean, think about it. Companies potentially paying the same amount for less work. Sounds kind of scary from a shareholder's perspective, right?
You'd think so, right? You'd expect the market to, plummet. Everyone fearing lower productivity, higher costs for businesses, the whole 9 yards. But that's not what happened at all.
Nope, not even close. This study we found, it found that when this whole 4-day work week thing was announced, the stock market actually had a positive reaction. Shareholder value in these Belgian companies, get this, it increased by an average of 2.4 billion euros. That's a lot of money, and definitely not what a lot of people were expecting.
And that right there tells you a lot about how investors think, right? They're not just looking at today, they're trying to predict tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. If they thought this change was going to hurt companies in the long run, those share prices would have tanked the fact that they went up. Well, that suggests they see this as a potential win-win.
Okay, so how do we explain this unexpected wave of optimism from the market?
Well, one way to look at it is through something called social exchange theory.
Social exchange theory, that rings a bell. Something to do with favors and reciprocity, right? I vaguely remember this from college.
Exactly. It's all about reciprocity. Basically, the idea is that when someone does something nice for you, you feel this kind of obligation to return the favor, right?
Yeah, if a friend helps you move, you're going to be there to help them move next time. No questions asked.
Exactly. So apply that to the workplace.
Yeah.
A company gives you something really valuable, like an extra day off every week, and employees might start to feel like they need to reciprocate, right? Maybe they become more productive with their time, more loyal to the company, or maybe they just put in a little extra effort on projects.
That makes sense. But isn't there also this argument that less work time automatically equals less productivity? I mean, there are only so many hours in a day, right?
Right, and that's a valid point. And there's this whole thing called the circadian rhythm, which basically suggests that when we try to cram all our work into fewer days, it can backfire. People might get more burned out, less productive overall.
So we've got this push and pull, right?
Yeah.
Increased motivation, but also the potential for burnout.
Yeah.
Did the study address that? How did they reconcile those two sides of the coin?
So the key here is choice. The Belgian model, it doesn't force everyone into this 4-day week. It's all about, flexibility,
Yeah.
Employees can choose to opt in if they think it'll work for them. And for those who are finding it's not a good fit, well, they can switch back to the traditional 5-day work week.
Makes sense. So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
Yeah.
But didn't the study go deeper than that? I feel like they also looked at what types of companies benefited most from this change, right?
Exactly. And one of the most interesting findings was that the companies that initially had a lower employee productivity actually experienced a bigger positive reaction in the stock market than those companies that were, already humming along at a high level of productivity.
Now that's fascinating. It seems a little counterintuitive, doesn't it? Why would investors be more gung-ho about the companies that weren't doing as well in the first place?
It might seem strange at first, but think about it this way. The companies that are starting off with lower productivity, they've got the most room for improvement, right? Investors are basically betting that a happier, more balanced workforce, thanks to that 4-day week, will lead to a massive surge in morale and motivation.
I see. So it's all about potential. That makes sense. But it wasn't just about overall productivity, was it? There was something in there about knowledge workers, too. Right? Remind me, who are we talking about when we say knowledge workers?
Right. So knowledge workers are those folks whose jobs rely heavily on brain power and specialized knowledge. Think, the people designing self-driving cars, developing new medicines, even the brilliant minds behind this podcast. Those are your knowledge workers. They thrive on things like autonomy and flexibility, much more so than employees in roles with, more rigid requirements.
Got it. So we're not talking about your typical clock in, clock out kind of job. But what's so special about knowledge workers in this whole 4-day work week scenario?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The study found that the companies with a higher percentage of these knowledge workers, the ones who are already highly skilled and motivated, saw even bigger jumps in their stock prices after the 4-day work week was announced.
So investors are basically thinking, give those knowledge workers a 4-day week and watch them flourish. They'll be super productive and make their companies even more successful.
Exactly. It's all about attracting and keeping the best and the brightest. If you're a company and you can offer something as attractive as a 4-day work week, you're suddenly way more appealing to those in-demand knowledge workers. It's a huge advantage in today's job market, and investors, they love that.
That would make sense. So far, we've seen that the 4-day work week is looking pretty good to investors, at least in the short term. But I'm curious, did the study look at the financial side of things? Like, what about salary costs? You'd think companies would be trying to figure out how to balance out the cost of that extra day off, right?
Absolutely. The study actually expected that companies with really high salary costs might see an even bigger jump in their share prices after the 4-day workweek announcement. The thinking was maybe, just maybe, employees would be willing to accept smaller raises or even slight pay cuts in exchange for that extra time off.
Interesting. A classic trade-off, right? More money or more time. So did that actually happen? Did employees bite?
You know what? They didn't. At least not in Belgium. It seems like Belgian employees were not about to trade in their paychecks for more time off, even with this new legislation.
Wow, so a 4-day work week is great, but not if it means taking a hit to those hard-earned euros.
Yeah.
That's really telling about how much people value different types of benefits.
It really is. It seems like even in a country like Belgium, which is known for prioritizing work-life balance, money still talks.
So much for that theory. Now, this next one might seem a bit counterintuitive, but I remember this study talked about companies that already had some flexible work policies in place. Things like remote work options, flex time, the whole shebang. The initial thought was that these companies might not see as much of a stock boost since, they were already ahead of the curve on the flexibility front. Was that the case?
Yeah.
So did those companies with more flexible policies see less of a stock boost?
Nope. This is where it gets interesting. Those companies saw just as much of a positive reaction as those without existing flexible policies.
So even though they were already offering things like remote work.
It's like the 4-day work week is in a whole different league when it comes to flexibility. It's not just about where you work. It's about fundamentally changing how we structure the work week.
I see what you mean. So it seems like Wall Street is pretty optimistic about this whole 4-day work week experiment, at least for now. But this study we've been talking about, it only captures those initial reactions, right? What about the long game? What happens 5-10 years down the line?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What we've been analyzing are those immediate gut reactions from the market. That initial wave of excitement and speculation. But the real story will unfold over time as companies and workers in Belgium really settle into this new way of working.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see if productivity actually goes up across the board, or if more companies start offering a 4-day work week as a way to attract top talent. Who knows? Maybe we're witnessing the start of a major workplace revolution.
It's definitely a story worth following, and you can bet we'll be keeping a close eye on it here at The Deep Dive. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Go for it.
We've spent a lot of time today talking about the potential upsides of a 4-day work week, right? Increased morale, higher productivity, that competitive edge in the war for talent. But it's important to remember that every change, no matter how well-intentioned, comes with its own set of challenges.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in the hype.
Exactly. So as this idea of a 4-day work week gains traction, I think it's crucial to keep an eye out for those unintended consequences. How will this impact things like collaboration and teamwork? Could it actually worsen existing inequalities or even create new ones? These are the questions we need to be asking ourselves as the world of work continues to evolve.
Absolutely. We can't just assume it's all smooth sailing from here on out. There's always more to consider. Well said.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.
And a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the 4-day work week and its surprising impact on the stock market. We'll be back next time with another fascinating topic. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.